But I don't buy for a second that 9-year-old Jack said anything of the sort.
No, I don't either.
But if he did, that's exactly why we don't listen to 9-year-olds when it comes to public policy, because that's how you end up banning plastic straws.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 135, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check them out at cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST when you purchase for a 10% discount off your order. So, how was your week? As usual, mine was nuts. Well, actually, not as usual. This was unusually nuts. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I had a new project that I was working on, and that project is now live. It's a new podcast called Unload and Show Clear. And as of this date, I think this is going to air on September 2nd, 2018, I have recorded 12 episodes, 6 of which have already been released, and you can check them out at unloadpodcast.com. I recorded 6 interviews for the new podcast and an interview for Armed Lutheran Radio just this week. So yeah, it was super busy. I did not expect to have that many people sign up that fast to be a part of the new podcast. So what is this new project? Well, I've been thinking about this for a while, ever since really the end of 2016 when we did a couple of roundtables about IDPA. Those 2 shows, episodes 45 and 48, are still 2 of the 4 most listened to shows in the history of the podcast. I think they may be 1 and 2, actually. On this new podcast, I'm going to be interviewing the people who make IDPA great. The shooters, the safety officers, the match directors from around the country who are passionate about the sport. Some of those voices you've heard in those roundtables back in 2016. Steve Koski, Scott Longhorn, Sam Williams, Ben Bolden, Mandy Bachman are all coming back for individual interviews. They're going to be on the show this year, but there's so many more people from all across the country that I'm getting a chance to meet, and I'm going to share their experiences with you. And here's the reason that I really wanted to do this. The media all too often is painting gun owners in one of 2 ways. We're either old, white, racist men, or if they are women, they are portrayed as irrational, and they've been convinced, they've been brainwashed by the NRA that they need to carry a gun to defend themselves against a threat that doesn't really exist. And I want to counter those narratives by introducing you to the people who shoot IDPA. Now, you may think to yourself, well, why IDPA? That's not exactly a very big sample of the gun-owning public. Why would you choose that group? Well, the game of IDPA, the sport, is based on concealed carry. And the entry point for IDPA is fairly low as far as competition shooting goes. You can bring the gear that you already have and start competing tomorrow if you want to. So the people who compete, for the most part, are not the Rob Lathams of the world. They are amazing, everyday people, some of whom are truly amazing shooters, no doubt. But they're fantastic people. They're a cross-section of the gun community. They're rich, they're poor, they're black, they're white, every color in between, every race, every religion, every economic status, young and old. They're salt-of-the-earth people who would loan you a gun even though they'd never even met you before. What is it Ken Blanchard says on his Black Man with a Gun podcast? I'm going to paraphrase badly here, but basically, anyone who would take your guns away is an enemy. Anyone who would give you or loan you a gun is family. IDPA matches are like big family reunions with safe and sporadic gunfire. I hope you'll check it out and let me know what you think. The first 6 shows are kind of an intro to IDPA. If you're not familiar with IDPA, it's going to give you the basics of, how the rules work, how scoring works, how matches and classifications and divisions, all that stuff works, the gear that you'll need to get started. Those were all released on Friday, August 31st, and the first interview show will be released on Labor Day, tomorrow, September 3rd, 2018. Now, those of you who are fans of this podcast, you might be wondering, well, what does this mean for Armed Lutheran Radio? Is something going to happen to this show? Nope, nothing's happening to this show. Armed Lutheran Radio marches on, and I have no plans to change. So you'll be still getting full-strength law, gospel, and gunfire on Armed Lutheran Radio on Sunday nights at 6 p.m. Central. And you'll get fun interviews with great people from around the world of IDPA on Unload and Show Clear on Mondays. Reformation Gun Club member Jackie Russo from Team Armed Lutheran Radio is going to be one of the first 6 guests. So check it out at unloadpodcast.com. Let me know what you think. So, what are we doing on Armed Lutheran Radio today? You're probably wondering. Well, I'm glad you asked. We have a ballistic minute from Sergeant Bill. Aaron is back from his trip to the Dakotas with a self-defense tip for us. Mia has another rifle shooting tip, and we're going to be meeting another member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Brian Duff, the host of Mind4Survival, joins us today. All that's coming your way next, right here on Armed Lutheran Radio, a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all of the great content at sdrn.us. I want to take a minute here to thank our partner, the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you're involved in a situation where you have to use your firearm in self-defense, you very well may find yourself in a legal battle against overzealous prosecutors or the families of the criminal who you shot or threatened, who are looking to deprive you of your freedom or your hard-earned savings. You may find yourself charged with a crime or facing a civil lawsuit even if you did nothing wrong. That's where Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network comes in. For a small yearly fee, they will provide you with money for attorneys, money for bail, consultations, and access to experts like Marty Hayes and Masad Ayub. Don't face the fight alone. Visit Armed Citizens Network today. Use the promo code ARMEDLutheran-25. Save $25 off your first year's membership, or you can grab the coupon on my website, armedlutheran.us. Sign up today. They will send you lots of cool resources, 8 instructional DVDs, and a book by Masad Ayub that I cannot recommend highly enough. Don't wait until you need their help. Be prepared. Sign up today. Visit armedcitizensnetwork.org.
It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to talk to you about an article from concealednation.org that came to me via Grant Cunningham's Hump Day reading list. If you're not following Grant Cunningham's website, be sure and get on there and check out his content. Lots of good stuff there. This article reads, a 47-year-old male and a 48-year-old female were on their way home when they observed a 29-year-old female being held at gunpoint by a male, later identified as Jeremy Cintron, 20 years old, of 21 Fairfax Road. Fearing for the female's safety, the citizen produced his own handgun that he legally possessed and pointed it at Mr. Cintron. The citizen yelled at him to drop his weapon. At this time, Mr. Cintron turned and pointed the weapon at the citizen and began to walk towards him. The citizen yelled out several more times to drop the weapon, and finally Mr. Cintron complied. The citizen ordered Mr. Cintron to the ground. Once on the ground, the citizen placed a knee on his back in an effort to hold him down while the girlfriend called police. The citizen was able to slide Mr. Cintron's weapon further away from the two in an effort to keep a safe distance. While waiting on police to arrive, Mr. Cintron rolled over and began to struggle for control of the citizen's gun. During the struggle, Mr. Cintron grabbed the gun and a round was fired into the pavement. At this time, Mr. Cintron was able to break free of the citizen's hold and fled on foot. Numerous police officers arrived at the scene and quickly searched the area for the suspect, and after a brief search, Mr. Cintron was apprehended on a nearby street. Okay, so let's break this down. So first off, you roll up on a person being held at gunpoint. Now, if you're going to get involved on behalf of a third party, you have to understand that you're assuming a whole lot of risk in a situation that you don't probably understand a whole lot about. There's all kinds of examples I can point to in law enforcement. If you just watch Live PD or Cops, you'll even see this, where police officers intervene on behalf of someone who's being assaulted, and the assaultee starts assaulting the cops, right? The victim becomes the aggressor towards the police officers. This happens all the time. That could very well happen to you if you intervene on behalf of a third party, and there's all kinds of examples I can give you of that. So it's a very risky situation to intervene in, and in most times, the not my circus, not my monkeys mentality that I've talked about before is going to be your best bet. You break contact from it, you call law enforcement and let law enforcement diffuse that situation. But if you do decide to get involved, as this armed citizen did, you need to be more decisive than he was. When he pointed the gun at the guy and said, "Drop your weapon," good stuff. I'm for that, giving that verbal command, pointing the gun at him, not using deadly force till you have to. But then when the guy didn't comply and turned around and pointed the gun at him, at that point you have to be willing to pull the trigger. You have to be ready to use deadly force and shoot the threat till it stops. I would not let someone point a gun at me and continue to shout commands at them and not pull the trigger. So he made a mistake there. That's bad form. You don't want to do that. If he doesn't comply with your orders, if you're going to make them and points a firearm at you, you've got to be ready to take action and use deadly force in that situation. Or you can get yourself in a really bad situation just like this individual did. The next thing, he gets the guy to comply, which is good. He got the guy to comply. The guy dropped his gun. He kicked the gun away, apparently, to where it was out of reach. But then he made another mistake. He got on top of the guy and put his knee in his back. You don't have handcuffs. You're not law enforcement. You don't want to wrestle with this guy. You already have a gun on him. You're at a position of advantage. If it's me, I'm going to keep that position of advantage, get behind some cover if any cover is available, keep my gun pointed at him, and wait for law enforcement to arrive. Now, even there, though, you've still got to be ready to use deadly force if he attempts to attack you, which very well could have happened even if you keep a safe distance away from him, but it's much less likely. You definitely don't want to make contact with the guy, because exactly what happened is what you'd expect. The guy started wrestling with him and took his gun away, and he's really lucky that he didn't get shot with his own firearm. Luckily, the round only went into the pavement and didn't injure the armed citizen. And the guy took off, and the police were able to capture him, which is all good at the end of the day. So it ended up being an okay outcome, but this very well could have been one of those negative outcomes that we talk about. So if you're going to intervene on behalf of a third party, which is usually not a good idea in the first place, then you have to be willing to take action if you're going to shout out commands. If someone points a gun at you after you've shouted at them to drop the firearm, you have to be ready to shoot them. Otherwise, there's no point in getting involved in the first place. And it looks to me like this guy probably bit off a little bit more than he could chew, probably hadn't thought about it a whole lot beforehand, and was just trying to be a hero and do the right thing, which I applaud him for his heroism, but his tactics need some work. So if you find yourself in a situation like this, my first bit of advice is going to be don't get involved at all. Pull away if you can and call the police, but if you feel compelled to get involved and that's on you, then you have to be more decisive than this guy. You have to be ready to use deadly force if your commands are not complied with. And you're taking on a whole lot of risk in a situation that you may not fully understand when you get involved on behalf of that third party. That's your personal defense tip for the week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a Personal Defense Network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
Hey, if you're like me, you like shopping at gun shows. No pressure from sales staff, no need to bother them to ask to look at stuff. You just pick stuff up and dry fire it and look at it and hold it. Imagine if you could get that experience at your local gun store, where you don't need to bother anybody. You don't have to ask people for help if you don't need it. You don't have salespeople hovering over your shoulders. Well, this is what it's like when you shop at G4G Guns. Cassie and Patrick Coburn are the owners, and you've heard them on the program before. They are absolutely awesome people, and they'll help you find exactly the right gear for you. But there's no sales pressure. You just browse the store, you pick up and hold anything that you want to look at without asking permission, just like at the gun show. And once you've found the gun you want, or if you actually do need assistance, Patrick and Cassie are there to help. It's the best of both worlds, gun shop and gun show, in one place. It really is the best. G4G Guns. They're located at 2035 Central Circle, Suite 108 in McKinney, Texas. They're open Mondays from 1 to 6, Tuesday through Thursday 11 to 7, and on the weekends you'll find them at a gun show near you. Or check them out online at G4G Guns. That's G, the number 4, G, guns.com. G4G Guns, the gallery for great guns. G4GGuns.com.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey guys, we're getting even closer to hunting season now, and we've been working on ways to be successful on your rifle hunt. And last week we talked about sighting in your rifle scope a quick and easy way. If you didn't hear that, you can go back and listen to it. But today I want to talk to you about the next step after that, because you've got to get the rifle off of the bench and get it in your hands and learn how to shoot it from different positions. In hunter education, we teach the basic 4 shooting positions. That is prone, sitting, kneeling, and standing. Prone is the most stable of the shooting positions, and if you have a way to get into prone position, I highly recommend it. Always remember the safety rules in any of the positions, but with prone position, lie flat on your stomach, use your arms, a bipod or the support of your backpack to hold the front end of the rifle. It's the most steady way. You pull the rifle into your shoulder and you're going to align yourself, put your cheek on the stock, and basically you have all the earth is supporting your whole entire body, and then your arms are supporting the gun. So try that one. Prone position seems to be the most accurate because your entire body is supported. Sitting position, you're going to sit on the ground. Some of us can do this better than others. If you're stiff and not flexible, you're going to have a hard time. But also in the field, the ground is going to be different angles and so forth. So you may be able to do it better on a sloping hill or whatnot. I like to kind of sit in a pretzel style, you might say, but you can sit cross-legged, or you can spread your legs out, put your feet in a tripod position, and then rest both of your elbows on the knee. This is something when I'm teaching that I see a lot of people, they'll get in the tripod position or the cross-leg position, but they don't actually put the elbows on the knees. But what you want is your elbows on your knees, and then obviously the weight goes from your elbows to your knees down to your feet, which are on the ground. So you have 3 points of contact on the ground, both feet and your behind. It's not the most stable position, but it's a lot more stable than kneeling or standing because you do have 3 points of contact. After that, try the kneeling position, and similar to standing position, you're going to be holding the gun. If you have a tripod or a bipod or a front support, use that. I mean, it's always good to have extra support, but if not, you're going to use your offhand to support the front end of the gun. You're going to have your trigger finger on the stock, put your cheek on the stock, and you're going to try to steady yourself. you want to, don't get up on your knees, actually put your bottom back on your foot so that you're not wavering around. If you can support your behind on your foot, you'll actually become a little more stable. So your front leg is going to be in a 90-degree angle, sort of. If you can get a little more forward where you're braced, that's great also. Again, that support hand on the forend of the rifle, the elbow is going to go on your knee, which is supported on the ground where your foot is. So this one, you've got one elbow on the knee, and then you've got your behind on your foot. So 2 points of contact, not quite as stable as the sitting or the prone position. After that, something that you really want to practice, especially if you're spot and stalk hunting and you're going to be maneuvering around in the field, and that's the standing position, because it is the quickest position to get into, although it's the least steady of them all. And it's one that you really need to practice, that brass technique that I talked to you about a few weeks ago. That technique is very important in this, because all you have steadying yourself is your feet on the ground, and then your muscles are holding everything else in place. You're going to have your support hand on the fore end of the rifle. Again, if you can get a bipod or a tripod or something for front end support, that is great. It will really help a lot. If you don't have that option, you've got to get your muscles strong enough to hold your rifle up while you take a shot. And something that you can do if you really practice is get that elbow from the fore end support hand, put your elbow down into your side right above your hip, and that'll actually help you get an angle support so the muzzle isn't wavering around quite as much. Again, do this at the range where it's safe, practice safe techniques out there, and I hope you guys are all successful in your hunts this year. Bye guys.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstein.com.
Hey guys, it's Mia here. If you follow me on social media, you know that I often share morning inspiration. Many people ask how I can keep this up every day. Well, it starts with my morning readings and that perfect cup of coffee. The official Dunkin' Donuts shop provides coffee lovers with everything they need, from K-Cup pods, original blended coffee, tea, drinkware, and more. Who doesn't want Dunkin' delivered to their front door? Shop today at www.armedlutheran.us/coffee and help support Armed Lutheran Radio today.
Let me take a moment to tell you about our membership site, the Reformation Gun Club. Members get exclusive content, all the segments, full-length interviews, full-length episodes of Clinging to God and Guns with extra content not released previously. They're kind of like the movies with the extended cuts or the director's cuts. Oftentimes what we have to do is trim those segments down so we can fit them into a reasonable time in the show, and that means extra content for you as a member of the Reformation Gun Club. You get access to our closed Facebook group, discounts from our partners like Gunbox gun safes, easy-to-see targets, Dowtech Force, Cook's holsters, Talon gun grips, inline fabrication, much more. So go check it out on Patreon. We've moved to Patreon. Registration is much easier. You get your own unique RSS feed, which means you can paste that into your favorite podcast app and take it with you and listen anywhere. For as little as $2 a month, you can take advantage of all of those benefits and help support the show. Visit patreon.com/armedlutheran or go to gunclub.armedlutheran.us and sign up today.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. So as Lloyd has said on the podcast several times before, he and I reload our competition and practice ammo. So one of the things that not everybody does, but I do with every round that goes through my press, is I case gauge my ammo. So case gauging, if you're not familiar with reloading terms, it's basically a piece of metal that's drilled to match the exact specifications, that's easy to say, as the chamber of the cartridge that it's designed for. Most of them are what's called a single barrel, so it's like the single barrel chamber of your barrel. And you drop the round in, you check to make sure it fits in flush all the way, and you rub your finger across it to make sure that the primer's seated properly, and good to go. You dump it out. It should come out pretty smoothly without having to force it out. And case gauge on that round is done, and you've got a good round of ammo. Now you can move on to the next one. So doing it one at a time like that can be, wow, it could take a long time if you reload 5, 6, 7, 800 rounds in a sitting in an hour or so. I have found a product. There's several different places you can get it. It's made by a company called Shock Bottle. I think I got it at the Ben Steger Pro Shop site, and it's called the Hundo Case Gauge. So what it is, it's a rectangular piece of aluminum that is drilled with 100 case gauges in it. Strangely enough, it's the exact same size as most of the aftermarket plastic ammo cases that you can get at pretty much anywhere, Dillon or Cabela's or even on Amazon. So this Hundo case gauge works perfectly with them. So what you do is you drop 100 rounds into your case gauge, and then you slide your finger across each row of 10 to make sure that they're all sitting flush, the primers are good, they're all fitting in there, and they're made correctly so that they will fit in your chamber and they will cycle and shoot through your gun. And then you can turn them upside down and put them into your case. What I've found is I'll take one of the cases that has a removable top, and I'll use it as kind of my transfer case. So I'll put it on top of the Hundo case gauge. I'll flip it over so it'll dump all the rounds into that case, but they're bullets facing up, primers facing down. And then I'll take the case that I'm going to put them in from that topless case and put the other case on top of it and flip it over, and you get 100 rounds, bullets facing down, primers up, close the case, move on to the next one, and you're good to go. So this Hundo case gauge is fast and easy, and it's a really, really good product. I've seen a video online where they tested doing 100 rounds using the Hundo case gauge versus the single case gauge, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it was eye-opening. So if you're doing a lot of reloading and you're getting a high round counts going through your press, and you need to put them all into cases and put them into ammo cans so you can take them out to the range and practice, I'd recommend getting a Hundo case gauge. I have one in 9mm and 45, and I use them all the time and love them. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Department and masterclass competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
Hey there, this is Sergeant Bill. After the successful completion of a match, Lloyd and I like to get together and top it off with a celebratory cigar. We get our post-match cigars from Cigar Page, home of America's best cigar deals. Visit armedlutheran.us/cigar and get a great deal. And also, help support Armed Lutheran Radio.
All right, I want to take a minute here to thank our incredible sponsor, Cook's Holsters. They have been with us from day one when this show was just an idea, really, before we even started the podcast. And I was so impressed with Bob Cook and his products that I signed up to become a dealer. I believe in the product so much, I wanted to sell it myself. Cook's Holsters makes custom Kydex holsters for range work, for concealed carry, for competition, inside the waistband, outside the waistband, in a variety of colors and prints and mounting options. Check out the new series of patriotic printed Kydex holsters as well. Those are really cool. And you may be asking yourself, every time you hear me talk about Cook's Holsters, well, what's the big deal? Why should I trust Cook's Holsters when there are so many other Kydex holster makers out there? Listen, Cook's makes the molds and sells printed kydex that many of the other holster manufacturers actually use to build their holsters. This is a great company. This is a great product. They come with a lifetime warranty against defects, 100% satisfaction guarantee, or your money back. Check them out today at cooksholsters.com. Be sure to use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST, that's all one word, and save 10% off your order. Go to cooksholsters.com today. Well, today we're visiting with another member of the Self-Defense Radio Network's Mind4Survival is a podcast dedicated to giving you the tools and resources to overcome any difficult situation. And Brian Duff is the host, and he is our special guest today. Brian, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be great.
Well, tell us a little about yourself. You are a former Southern California surfer kid who ended up in the U.S. military. How did that happen? As growing up in California, and as you describe yourself as a surfer dude, what was the motivation to get involved in the military, to join the military?
Well, I had always wanted to be in the military. And when I was 17 years old in high school, I tried to get my mother to sign the paperwork to let me enlist in the Marine Corps. And she's like, no, she had friends that when she was growing up that died in Vietnam. So she was basically like, hey, I didn't raise you all these years just to have you go and get killed. So, a lot of weird things took place. I was big into swimming, as I said, surfing. So I ended up going to college and I was swimming, and one thing led to another. I started taking a fire science class one day just because I thought firefighters had a pretty cool job. And that led to me becoming an EMT, then a paramedic. And I was actually working as a paid firefighter in Southern California for, probably about 4 years or so. And I just got bored with it. It just wasn't for me. And I didn't really enjoy it that much. So I still had always wanted to be in the military. And I literally stopped at a stoplight on my way home from work one morning. And I looked to the right and there was the Army recruiting station. And I walked in and I said, hey, I'm here. And I let them know, like, I'm a paramedic firefighter in Southern California. So it wouldn't break my heart to leave if they wanted to try to give me the sales pitch. And they asked me what I wanted to do. And there was a picture of a guy driving a tank up on the wall, and then a poster of a guy jumping out of an airplane. I'm like, I want to do one of those two jobs. And I guess, I don't know, it was the recruiting trick. He said, well, we're kind of full on tank people right now, but I'm pretty sure I can get you in the infantry. And so one thing led to another. He asked if I wanted to sign a ranger contract to be a ranger, which I literally thought was, because I was a firefighter, I thought it was like the guys who like the smoke jumpers that would parachute into forest fires and do stuff like that. I had no idea what I was doing. Ended up doing it, and I'm just a stubborn person that won't quit. And one thing led another, and I made it through selection, and I did an enlistment with the Ranger Regiment.
So you didn't make a decision that, hey, I want to be one of these elite warriors. They actually kind of fast tracked you into it without you really realizing what you were getting into.
Yeah, exactly. They pretty much told me, they said, well, you're in the infantry, so you'll be able to, you'll do a lot of time out in the woods, which as a civilian working for the fire department, I paid a lot of money to camp and for camping gear. And then I loved shooting and all this stuff. And basically they were giving me all of that for free, plus cool camo clothes at the time and a fully automatic weapon. So I was like, man, this is, you're paying me for this? Really?
So did you grow up around guns, or you come from a military family? Where did the interest in guns and the outdoors and the military come from?
So I grew up around guns. My father, he enjoyed shooting, and this is, kind of pre all the modern shooting that goes on with IPSC and everything like that. This was go out with your buddies and shooting the side of the hill up in the mountains in California. And some friends of the family had a cabin up in a place called Lake Isabella, which is probably about 45 minutes north of Bakersfield in Southern California, up in the hills, up in the foothills of the Sierra. And there's a nice lake there. And so we'd go up there as a kid. That's where we would always go for vacation and trips and stuff. And so I was raised around guns. We'd go out, and I really didn't even enjoy them, because all I knew is every time my dad and his buddies went to shoot, I was going to be stuck sitting there all day watching them shooting the side of the hill and be I guess at the time, 20-something-year-old goofballs. And, but it got me started in guns. They taught me the fundamentals of shooting. They, taught me how to fish. We'd get up in the morning and go fish and all this stuff. So that's kind of where it took place from.
So you end up in Georgia. This was where was that where you did basic? Was that where you went through Ranger?
Yeah, I
training?
did everything in Georgia. I did basic training there. I went to selection there, airborne school there. And then I got assigned to Columbus, Georgia. And one thing led to another. I came back to California after leaving the military, and I just couldn't deal with Los Angeles anymore. Just too big, too many people. It was California, even California before the early 90s it was still, granola, fruits and nuts and granola and all that stuff, but it wasn't like it is now. So it was a great place. I was very fortunate to grow up when I did there. But I just couldn't deal with it anymore. They drive 80 miles an hour everywhere they go in Southern California and Georgia. It was, people drive maybe 60. I like the pace. I like the people. I like the outdoors lifestyle in the South.
Yep. But in between Georgia and, you said you were out west. So are you back home visiting family, or are you living back in California again? Where are you now?
No. So I just moved to Las Vegas about 5 months ago. I guess it was about 5 months ago. Yeah. February, whatever that comes out to be, 5 or 6 months ago. And, I'm the training center director for North American Rescue's, training center out here in Las Vegas.
Very cool.
Yeah. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
As close as you want to get to California at this point, I guess.
Yeah, it works nice. It gives me the ability to see family more than I was before, because it's just, time change and flying out for a weekend from back east out to LA kind of, you don't get a whole lot of time. So it makes it difficult. But yeah, it's nice being out here now.
Nice. And I imagine as much as you disliked being doing the firefighter thing back then, I bet right now would not be a whole lot of fun either.
No, it's... the firefighter thing was fun, but it didn't, it just didn't do it for me. For some reason, I enjoyed the paramedic side of the house more. It made me think a lot more. Mm-hmm. And so that I kind of followed that for a long time. And that's how I ended up out here doing this, actually.
So you did a number of overseas deployments. You were in the service for over 10 years, right? No.
So I ended up in 2003. I was working in Atlanta as a paramedic, and one of my partners told me if I asked if I'd heard about overseas contractors. I'm like, what? Oh, yeah. I go, what, going overseas and, building a house or something? What are you talking about? And so she's like, no, being a paramedic and doing security or different stuff like that. So I was actually hired to go over in 2004, and I went to Afghanistan for 6 months and ran medical clinics in 4 medical clinics in Afghanistan and one in Uzbekistan. And then I got picked up by Blackwater, and I went back overseas and did probably 3 years, just around maybe 2.5, 3 years with Blackwater in Iraq. Then I ended up moving on from there. I went to South Sudan for a year, back to Iraq for a year. Then I was hired by the State Department to work in their special operations division called Mobile Security Deployments, and went over to Pakistan with them for a while. And then ended up taking a job within the State Department, a different job, but it was overseeing the guard forces and different security contractors that were doing diplomatic protection. So I built a consulate, or was part of a team of 5 people that built a consulate in South Iraq, and ran the security out of Basra for a while, and then went up and I ran the guard force for the embassy in Baghdad for a few years.
Wow. So you saw most of your action really after you got out of the military.
Yeah. There was, there wasn't a whole lot that happened when I was in the military. We would deploy and do things, but it wasn't like it is now. I mean, the soldiers that are out there now are just phenomenal. If people think about it, you had 9/11 and it's now 2018. So you have soldiers that have literally done their career while we were at war, which to me is just amazing. And,
it really is.
And so I did it the majority of my time. I think I was talking to someone the other day, and I think in Iraq, I had just over 2,000 days on the ground in Iraq.
Wow. Good grief. Well, your bio says that you're OCD about cleaning. How did that work out when you're deployed in places like South Sudan?
It's a challenge. That goes along with that part that I don't quit. So yeah, I love to clean. It's almost therapeutic for me. So I kind of, when I left the military, I never stopped rolling my socks. They get you to roll your sock a certain way. And I've broken from it a little bit, but overall I'm still pretty much the same. I have OCD and I love to keep things clean.
Well, talk about some of the lessons you learned in those deployments that you're putting to use in your podcast every day, some of the things that have influenced your everyday life that you're now using and imparting to your listeners?
Sure. Well, number one is bad things happen to good people. I mean, all the way back to when I first started as a paramedic in South Central LA, it was sure bad people would do bad things to each other, but and I'm pretty sure all your listeners are good people just like mine. And, just bad things. You're in the wrong place, wrong time. And someone shows up and does bad things or situations cause something to happen. The other thing is that there are evil people in the world. And it's one of the things that I was frustrated. And I think most people in Iraq were frustrated when you'd come home and you'd hear people say, well, are they really that bad? Not all, no, but the ones that are bad are super bad. Some of the worst people you've ever seen. And there's evil people trying to do evil things and whether that's a criminal that's wanting to rob a liquor store or on up to a terrorist, they're out there, and the odds that we'll intersect in our lives with that person are slim. But if it happens, you need to be ready for it to overcome the event. And then lastly, I'm huge on situational awareness. Everybody needs to really pay attention to what's going on around them. I think a lot of people try to go overboard when they first get into it, and it overwhelms them because they try to pay attention to everything and they try to really be on their game all the time. No, your brain can't function like that for more than in the military, some guys would do it for days, but it's a finite amount of time that you can function like that. So as long as you can pay attention to the world and constantly work on improving your ability to understand what's happening in the world around you or the environment around you, then you're able to hopefully overcome those first two, that there are bad people out there and that bad people do, bad things to good people.
Yep, exactly right. We talked about that on my show last week.
Oh, cool.
I don't know whether you saw that news story about the two Americans who decided to leave their everyday lives and go bicycling over in Tajikistan or somewhere. I mean, they went all over the world, and one of them wrote in his blog as they were out there, talked about how he thought evil was a made-up concept that we use when we don't understand other cultures. And then what happened was that evil ran them over on a street in Tajikistan and then got out and stabbed them to death.
Oh, wow.
And and it turns out it was ISIS that did it. I think the biggest problem, and we see this on my podcast a lot when one of the segments on the show, we take articles that try to push gun control using scripture, and we debunk it. And the biggest thing that we tend to see is this lack of acceptance of the reality of evil, right? The idea that that mankind is inherently wicked, and instead of the idea that mankind is generally good and that they just make bad decisions. And I think that's where a lot of the problem that we have especially when it comes to the gun control debate.
Right.
People think that we can just get rid of guns and then all the evil will go away. No, it's going to be there no matter what.
Sure. Yeah, that's a huge problem. And they don't understand that. And unfortunately, I'm sure it drives half your listeners crazy, is they want to push that agenda, and they don't realize that once they get that agenda through, then when that evil does rear its ugly head, they're stuck. There's nothing they can do about it.
Yep. Is there a that kind of misconception in the security world at the government level? Is there a misunderstanding of what it is we're really facing out there?
No, I think the government is pretty in tune with it. I mean, again, they get all now the government that I dealt with in the security realm doing diplomatic security is in tune with it. Right. So they see what's happening and they hear from their friends. I think some people may not like believing that, because it's kind of a sad state of affairs when you actually, get to the point where you admit and you accept the fact that, yeah, there are a lot of evil people in this world. Then there's the other side of the government, like when I worked with State Department, where you had people who they didn't see it. We were in Iraq, and this was 2000, I think it was 2005 or 2006. And I was on a USAID protection team. So we would take the USAID personnel around Iraq so they can do different things. And we were taking this one lady over to meet with some of the locals or something one day for lunch. And she looked over at us and she was asking us, and she was completely serious about it, is, why do you have to carry weapons here? Why do you think you need to carry weapons? And her thing was that the only reason the bad guys were doing anything was because we were there armed with weapons. And if we laid our weapons down, we would be fine. Now, these are the same people that when we asked them to come to our daily intel brief, hey, come and see what's really going on in Iraq. So you can see why you do all this stuff. They're the same people that they after the first intel brief, they basically cried and said, I can't go to that anymore. It scares me too much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an eye opener.
Yeah, and I think they have good intentions. I won't take anything away from their intentions, but they are so convinced of their beliefs that, these people aren't bad, that they're actually good. We just misunderstand them and their culture or whatever, just like you said. But in reality, they're naive. They're super naive. They don't understand it. When something does happen, they want to close their eyes and not accept the fact that it is what it is. And so I think that's where a lot of the problems cause. And unfortunately, those are a lot of your, especially in the State Department, those are a lot of your diplomats. You run into that a lot. And they're very well meaning, but I don't know that necessarily that they always understand the ramifications of their beliefs.
Yeah, I would agree. Wow. That's so. All right, let's before we start talking specifically about the podcast, I wanted to ask you a couple of fun questions.
Sure.
How does the surfer kid turned badass Army Ranger turn into a Green Bay Packers owner?
Well, that was actually a friend of my father's when he got this. We're talking in the early 70s. God, it's weird when now, I feel so old talking about the early 70s. 20 years ago, it wasn't that way. But so it was the early 70s. A good friend of my father's had just come back from Vietnam, and he was, he didn't have a bunch of money. He just got out of Vietnam. And so I think it was Christmas or my birthday or something, but he gave me some sort of, it was either a Packers shirt or sweatshirt. I really don't remember now, but I knew at the time that when I had that, so when my father and his friends would watch football, I was like, well, I'm a Packers fan. I got the Packers shirt. And I need to go back, and I should have given, if I go back in time, I give him back his shirt. So he made for a lot of strenuous Packers years with the Packers. And, up to now, I'm part of the group that, stopped watching football over the protests last year. So, but towards all that, but yeah, it was, I love the Packers. If everybody is a football lover, I'll tell you, go to Lambeau Field and see a game. The fans there treat everybody just great. They're happier there watching football. A lot of history and tradition. It's just a really amazing time.
So your bio also says that you like to tinker in your garage. What kinds of things are you tinkering with out there?
Just like any prepper, like looking at different flashlights. Okay, what can I do with one of my firearms? Or can I, just always finding something to come up with. I would go back there and try to make a rocket stove out of cans or something like that. Just see what's going on. Right now, since I moved, we got out here, and then I was busy with transitioning to my new job, and then summertime arrived in Vegas, and it had, it's been 100 something for the last 2 months now. So going into the garage to work, there's not a whole lot of tinkering going on. I'm waiting for fall to tinker up again.
Yeah. My garage tinkering stopped here in Texas about 2 months ago.
Yeah, so, you can relate.
Yep, exactly right. So a quick fun question is, what was the first, you said you grew up around guns, didn't get to shoot them as much as you watched your dad shoot them, but sure. What was the first gun that you went out and bought for yourself?
The first gun that I went out and bought for myself. Wow. Okay. Now this is going back in California. I think my father had bought me a Ruger 1022 for Christmas one year. And I had the BB guns, the Red Riders and all that.
Right.
And I don't know which is the first, but it was either an AK-47 or I was 20 when I was 18, 19, 21. I was like, I'm going to buy my AK. And then I bought a Mossberg 500 shotgun, pump action shotgun for hunting birds.
Went straight to the AK.
Hey, I had the 22. That seemed like next, logical thing in the line of progression.
That's right. Go big or go home.
Yeah. Which I'm proud to say I bought an AK in California, right? With a detachable magazine, no button, no mag button release and all this stuff. So
that's pretty amazing. Do you still have it?
No, I got rid of it years ago. Actually, I wish I did, but I got rid of that years ago. When I started moving around in the military, they were just kind of a pain to drag around, and so I cut way back on what I needed.
That would be an amazing story to tell your grandkids. I bought this gun in California back when you could still buy guns in California.
Yeah, I just saw, what was it the other day they're trying to do in California now? Oh, they want to ban stores or restaurants from selling anything but milk or giving milk or water to kids.
Milk or water to kids, yes. You can still ask for it, but they can't offer it on the menu. That is insane. A crazy place.
Oh, man. Yeah. Every
time my wife is like, you want to go out to, what is the Disney place?
Disneyland?
Is it Disneyland? Okay. Yeah. I get them confused. That one and the one in Florida. And I'm like, no, let's go the other direction. We'll go to Florida instead.
Yeah.
I had no interest in going to California.
No.
So now that you've settled down a bit and you're not traveling all over the world, have you got a collection of stuff of your own have you collected things over the years in the gun safe?
Oh yeah. I think I'm just like anybody else. Now I'm kind of a believer and I don't need an entire arsenal to,
right.
You might be able to shoot two firearms at a time, but that's going to be pretty much your limit. I guess you could use your toes maybe, but so I kind of go at it with that mentality. It's like, I don't need a lot. So rather than buying a lot of guns, I'll save and buy like a really nice gun or something that I can work on and tinker with and modify to whatever I want to do, get a nice optic to go with it or something along those lines.
Very cool. So if you had to get rid of everything tomorrow, but you could only keep one, what would it be?
Oof. I guess I'd probably, for everyday carry kind of stuff, I'd probably keep my Glock. I have a Glock 19 and a Glock 43. I don't know which I'd keep out of those two. Probably the 19.
Is there anything sentimental in the collection?
No, actually, all my father's guns. When I was working over in Iraq in 2010, about a week before I came home, my house was robbed and they rolled the gun safe out my front door. So all the sentimental guns are elsewhere. Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, it stunk. Amazing what a crackhead with a dolly can do.
Really?
Yeah. That's I was like, and I'll tell people, man, I hadn't anchored it to the floor. I had put it in a closet that had a deadbolt lock on it, and a couple of deadbolts actually, and they literally cut through the middle of the door to be able to pull the door open. And then they wheeled it out the house, and I talked to the police about it, and they said, yeah, it's kind of what they do. And I said, well, it's in a safe, it was a halfway decent safe. And she's like, man, they will pop that safe in
no time.
If they have trouble doing it, it'll be about 15 minutes with pry bars. But she says that they get them open pretty much every time.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to go anchor my safe tomorrow.
Yeah. And that's, part of the problem, right? We put stuff, it was my own normalcy bias. This will be fine. So I threw it in the corner and everything, thought it'd be good.
Right.
Got me in the end.
So now you've taken all of these experiences, your service in the Army, your deployments, your time as a security specialist with the government, your OCD, and you put them together into a podcast called Mind4Survival. What motivated you to start podcasting?
Well, actually, I think it was about 2010 or so. And I remember talking to my buddies, and we'd sit around at night like, what do you want to do when you get done with doing this nonsense overseas and this and that? Well, we started talking about security. And originally I was looking at opening a security company. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that just as a paramedic for years here in the States and other things that I've done, I've just always seen, again, bad things happen to good people. And I always want to try, I've been, fortunate or unfortunate enough to go through all these experiences in my life and kind of learn a lot of firsthand knowledge out there, but not everybody has done that. And I want to try to bring it to them so that way they can learn through my experiences and hopefully not suffer or get into a jam that causes them problems. And then flash forward about 2012, I was back in Baghdad and I started reading some of the borderline zombie prepper fiction, which translated into reading prepper fiction. I think Chris Weatherman and Franklin Horton and those guys. And at the same time, I started listening to Dale Goodwin's Survivalist Prepper podcast. And I had grown up in the 80s, really in the 90s when I kind of got familiar with survivalists, and that's what it was back then, survivalists. And then I'm like, oh, what are these preppers? And I realized that's me. I said, I'm a prepper. I was never big into the survivalist movement or anything like that, but I always liked being prepared. And so one thing led to another, and I said, yeah, I'm doing this. Let's go. And I'll tell you, I love it. It's, I'm sure you do it. It's not like I haven't been able to get independently wealthy. I think I made $8 off my podcast last year, and it was for an episode on gold and silver I did, and I got a commission for someone bought some gold. But other than that, nice. All of our hosting, everything, I sink money into it, but I really love it. And the best part about the preparedness community is the people. They're just amazing, good-natured, fun people, and I really like hanging out with. I guess that's what you do nowadays. Hang out on Facebook with people,
right?
So, but I really love it, and I love the people, and that's made it all worth it.
Very cool. Well, I've watched enough movies and TV, and I've played enough video games to know that the key to survival is food and water and guns and something to keep the zombies out. But that's not what Mind4Survival is really all about, is it? This is kind of a holistic approach to survival, not just prepping, not into the world stuff, right? This is everyday safety issues.
Yeah, I think some people, we all have our event, a cataclysmic event of choice, whether it's an EMP or economic collapse or asteroid, whatever the case may be. Everybody thinks of one or two things that they say this might be the way to go. But in reality, the Earth hasn't had a world-ending asteroid hit since the dinosaurs got wiped off. Is it a chance? Yeah. Is there a chance the supervolcano? All these big events, sure, they can happen. EMP, coronal mass ejection, what have you. But I guarantee you what's likely to happen is when you drive to 7-Eleven or the restaurant down the street and some crazy person drives through a red light and runs into your car, or something happens with your kid riding the bike, or you get a bad infection from getting cut and not treating it right. That's the stuff that's likely to really jam people up nowadays. Mm-hmm. And so I try to go from the philosophy of one, really big into mindset and situational awareness, to sit back and what if yourself, look at your different possible scenarios that could happen to you, do your own sort of personal risk assessment to see where you really need to focus on, and then work to address it. And if I just had somebody write on my Instagram feed today about, she started listening to the podcast. And I think she listens to some other ones. So, it goes across all the podcasts. Everybody talks about bug out bags and being prepared. Well, her and I think one of her friends were driving out in the mountains somewhere. She's a homesteader, and their car broke down and they had to walk 30 miles. And she's like, I had this bug out bag that I heard about in your podcast. And so that made it all, that kind of stuff makes it all worthwhile. But it's that kind of stuff that I think, you and probably a lot of your listeners take for granted because we just know it. It's how we look at life. But there's so many people out there that don't, and that as the craziness of politics and everything else that's going on, there's more and more people coming to preparedness, and they're going, wow, I never thought of this stuff.
Yep. It's not the, build a bunker in the backyard and wait for the world to end stuff anymore.
Yeah. And there's, people, when they go about their day, they can ask themselves a couple of questions. They can say, what do I have to protect? Like, is it people, family, friends, etc.? Is it your hard assets like your home, your car, your stereo, consumables such as food and cash? Or then you get into your intellectual property like your computers, Wi-Fi, and all that. And then it's what or who do I have to protect it from? So you can say, okay, here's what I have to protect. I have to protect my computers from Hurricane Katrina or from the bad guy down the street. And then what do you have to protect it with? And once you figure that out, just like you're saying, I think you can get a good feeling of where you need to be. And what I think a lot of people will find if they do that, and two of the biggest complaints or two biggest struggles that I hear when it comes to prepping is time and money. It takes a lot of time. We're all busy as it is. And then it takes a lot of money. The world's not a cheap place to live anymore. So one of the things you can find by actually taking the time to do this and truly analyze, like you were saying, is that you can identify what you need, and you don't spend a lot of time wasting your time or money on fixing something that you don't need to fix, or that you can use. Say one thing, for example, if you're worried about a natural disaster, but you're also saying that, hey, you know what? I have a really insecure job and I might go 6 months without a paycheck. Well, then maybe you want to stockpile food. Right. Hey, I would much rather eat rice and beans than go hungry. So stockpile that food for a personal disaster, such as losing your job and having difficulty with finances. But then if you get snowed in the winter, or you get hit with some other disaster or something that happens, now you have that food supply to fall back on. So,
right. Very cool. So where can listeners find out more about the podcast? Where can they listen?
Sure. If they go to Mind4 and survival.com, it's Mind4Survival.com. You can get my podcast, my blog, everything's on there. I have a link to the Facebook group, and I'm on Instagram. Like everybody now, I have it on everything. It's a nightmare, but it's mostly go to the blog. And if you catch me on Facebook, feel free to friend me. And if anybody has questions, just shoot me questions. I love it. I answer them, or join the Facebook group, and people put a lot of questions up in there. And it's just a great community, man. I really love it.
Well, Brian Duff is the host of Mind4Survival, the newest, one of the newest members of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Be sure to check it out at sdrn.us and at mind4survival.com. We've got links to all of his website and his social media stuff. You can find him there as well. Ways to subscribe to his podcast. Check out his latest episodes. Brian, thanks for your service, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Lloyd, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And thanks for putting your network together. You're doing an amazing job, and it's doing a lot of good for the people out there. So keep it up, man. I know it's a lot of work, but I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else does.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate that.
No problem.
And that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. Thank you all for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. Thank you to our fine sponsors who make all this possible. Thank you to my awesome cast of contributors. And thank you, dear listener, for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. I hope you'll join us again next week. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.